In the 7th century, in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, there was a woman with 12 children. She was called Mrs. Leeds. She lived in the isolated areas of the Pine Barrens, surrounded by a forbidden forest. But on a rainy, stormy night, she was going to give birth to her 13th child in 1735. Mrs. Leeds didn't want the 13th child, and instead she cursed herself. She went into her room and prayed to the Lord. She said, "Make it not be a child, make it be a devil." That night, Mrs. Leeds was ready to give birth. The midwives gathered around her to bring the beastly baby into the world. But then the baby came out. It wasn't a demon. It was a perfectly healthy child. But then suddenly the baby changed shape into a grotesque, horse-like monster. It grew bat wings, pig feet, and a long serpent tail. It was at that point that Mrs. Leeds realised that she got her wish. As soon as the child was fully formed, it said to have devoured Mother Leeds, the midwife, the rest of the family, and including the children. Then it let out the most god-awful scream and flew out the chimney and into the Pine Barrens where it lives till this day. Decades passed, and in the year 1909, the Jersey Devil was sighted a number of times. People in the area took it serious and decided to close schools, factories down, and hunters were sent out to kill the beast. But then a religious leader came forward and tried to exorcise the devil for 100 years, but the exorcism didn't work. Then in 1963, an 8-year-old boy was babysitting his sister when his parents were at work. A few minutes later, they started hearing something in the basement. The boy went over to try and hear what it was, and he heard hopping coming up the cellar steps. So his instincts kicked in, and he decided to lock the door. The thing started banging on the door very violently, which scared him and his sister. So they got together and ran outside and waited for their parents' return. The parents came around the block. The kids told them what happened. Then the father got the flashlight and went down into the cellar. He seen the paint scattered everywhere, the tinsel all over the floor, the wardrobes bashed everywhere. But there was no sign of a monster, and he knew that his kids were not responsible for this, because they wouldn't dare themselves to go down into the cellar. 40 years later, in the middle of the Pine Barrens, there was a family of 5. The family moved to the Pine Barrens in 2003, but in January, that's when they had the first snowstorm. The mum realised that she'd left the Christmas lights on, but since it was dark and creepy out there, she decided to bring her 11-year-old son along with her to company outside. But as soon as the mum unplugged the Christmas lights, her son becomes very disturbed of something he could see within the woods. She turns around and sees what he sees. A giant bipedal creature with a large forehead, little horns, and coal-piercing eyes. Frightened, they ran back into their house, but the creature opened its wings and flew in their direction. Luckily for them, they managed to get in, but the creature landed on the roof, making the click-clack metallic noise. The mother and child huddled together in fear and spent a sleepless night. But the next morning they woke up, went up onto the roof. The snow was still deep, but the creature wasn't there. Instead, they seen the footprints, and she took pictures of them.